know that folks knew Jamie best at different times in his life. So I'm hoping that people will feel like they could maybe share a story. And I've heard tons of them already from people, stories I've never heard at all, and crazy, scary stories too. We'll keep them, on the
clean level,
on the upside, yeah. But hopefully we can put together enough stories to create a patchwork of his life. Jamie is survived by his sister Leah Chisholm. This is Leah right here. Leah would like to say a few words about Jamie, and then perhaps I'll follow up a little bit, and then we'll just invite people to share. And it's just so wonderful to see everyone here to celebrate Jamie's life. I see faces that I haven't, laid eyes on in years and years, and it's just so great to see everyone. So thank you all for being here. Leah, would you like to speak?
Hello, everyone. Okay, I prepared a few words, right? And I just so I don't lose my place, I printed them out in large print. So a sign of
good girl.
Yeah, well, I graduated in '72, so you guys can do the math. I'm getting up there. But yeah, I thank everybody for coming. So, Jamie, my only sibling. For me, my whole life, but I'm going to talk about younger years. He was a force. I always referred, growing up, to Jamie as my big brother. For a couple of reasons. I'm 4 years older, 3.5. He was my big brother because number one, he was bigger than me. He was a big guy, right? But because I always looked up to him. I always looked up to him for assistance and guidance, and it was always there for me, unconditional. So that's my big brother. So, but okay, so let's talk about a little bit about the young years, because there's no way nobody's gonna know about this. But one of the favorite little stories we would tell probably every holiday that we got together. It was when we were young, and I was in grade school. We were kind of like grade school years. So what I convinced Jamie, because I was a mean little older sister, I convinced Jamie that a nickel was worth more than a dime because it was bigger, and he fell for it. And so we always have a good laugh about that. And I was able to start a college fund on the that. So, but he laid in waiting. He got even, but he waited till we were in high school to get even with all my little shenanigans. Probably, like convincing his left hand was his right and all that. Probably all siblings did that, right? But he waited till we were in high school. We were living here in Independence. He took up the saxophone, right? So, high school, teenage girls, you have slumber parties and sleepovers. So he would wait, and this house was small. It had paper walls, and his bedroom was right next to mine. He would wait till I had a girlfriend over for a slumber party before he'd start practicing. And he was a newbie on it, and it was sour. It was ear piercing. It was, he got even with me. So that was that. So, okay. So that's just a little story. Sorry, I haven't done any public speaking for many years. Well, I'm just going to end this up, and this is kind of on sweet note, but not too sad. And this I'm actually going to kind of read so I don't mess it up. So this is actually speaking to Jamie as much as I'm speaking to you. Jamie, as my only sibling, you are half my heart. My My heart has been shattered in two, but now, instead of the pain, your half of my heart has become a vessel. A vessel that I can begin filling with loving memories. Instead of spending time with you, I spend time reflecting about you. I love you, bro. I will see you on the flip side. Thank you, everybody, and thank you for loving my brother.
Thanks, Leah.
Thank you.
So I wanted to mention that there's a booklet that you're welcome to have, just with some photographs and a few philosophical
Did you
quotes
get
from
me a
Jamie's, one of
flyer?
Jamie's favorite philosophers, Festus of Gunsmoke. You know, the sense of humor was always there. We would also like everyone who wants a souvenir to take a refrigerator magnet, and they're right on the front side there. Folks are looking down there. Jill's looking down right now at that collection. He traveled all over the world in his professional life doing information technology for Hewlett Packard, and he was in the UK. He was every place in the European Union he basically visited. Australia, Hong Kong, mainland China, among other locations. But what a wealth of experience in just that one little part of his lifetime. And he came to this very late. You know, he did a number of things, and then graduated from college as you know, an adult student. Went into information technology, and he was a natural tinkerer. And he found this vocation, and he was brilliant at it, and he just had such a rewarding career. I also, talking about these magnets, also want to invite everyone to write Jamie a message if you like, or at least include your name. There's a booklet over there. You can draw a picture, you can write a name, you can write a message, whatever you care to do, but please do consider signing that guest book. I wanted to focus a little bit on Jamie's earlier life, because as I mentioned, that's when I knew him best. As soon as we were old enough to drive, we started working in the fields for the local farmers. And the Olson Farms, for instance, and Roger Olson is here, that was a source of employment for most of the young kids in the neighborhood. Ray Lindley here, Justin Much, we all did this. Bill Vaughn, we all worked in the fields at one point or another, toiling. But I know when we were kids, Jamie, Justin Mudge and I, and then David Laos, who's not here, formed the core crew of mint irrigators for Creeder Farms.
He passed away. David Laos
David Laos passed away.
just passed away.
Terry's husband passed away a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, it's nice to remember David then too.
Yeah.
Anyway, our workday started just in a field adjacent to the park here, which we called the Riddle Field. It was owned by the Riddle family. We would do the morning set, then we would make our way east to the Ogle Field, which was kind of near Buena Vista. Then we would cross the ferry. So really, in the early life, we were crisscrossing the Willamette. Jamie was crisscrossing the globe. Later in life, we were crisscrossing the Willamette. And most of the time, now this was a very hard day. Everybody who did farm work knew that all you did was work, 12, 13-hour days. And what we would do, we were usually miserable and hot by mid-afternoon, and we'd have to do this process twice. So in crossing the Buena Vista Ferry, we had talked the ferry operator into letting us climb up on top of his cabin and then dive off into the river as the ferry was crossing.
Oh my gosh.
And if you were efficient about it, you could get three plunges in before it got to the other side. So this was just a routine act. This was something, every day it was some kind of adventure like that, but this is just, a typical day. One time our boss, Jeff, came with us, the younger Creeder, and he wanted to do it too. And of course, we were in the habit of stripping down to our boxer shorts, which was the style at the time, and they would jump in, and we would be very unencumbered and swim back to the ferry and catch it, before the current could sweep you down. Well, Jeff didn't make it. His pants were too heavy, kind of pulled him downstream. And David Laos, though, was kind enough to grab the life buoy and then jump in the water and swim it out to Jeff. Damned if the safety line wasn't tied onto the boat. So they all went downstream. I just remember standing on the deck, and I can't even picture what Jamie was doing, probably getting in his third dive. And I was standing on the deck watching these two little figures disappear down the road. So the good thing is everybody was okay, and the bad thing, or the bad outcome from it, was that we just didn't get to dive off the roof anymore. And I mention this, it's a little bit, adjacent to something specific about Jamie, but that I believe it formed his ethos, because back then it just didn't seem like there were that many rules, right? I mean,
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, there just didn't seem to be that many rules, that you had to abide by. And if there were rules, then you just sort of interpreted them. And that, I believe, informed his ethos, because he was a very independent person. He always went his own way. He just kind of had a different take on things. And if there was a way to fix it that wasn't by the book, then he would do it, which made him a wonderful do-it-yourself person, and then I think led him to his career in information technology. But he also loved to work on cars. He also, there was never a car that he didn't want to fix. He loved collecting strays, dogs and cats of all kinds, and nurturing them. And then back to the cars, at the time of his death, and his neighbors know this, he owned 5 automobiles. None of them worked. But that was kind of typical, because it was always just a spark plug away from being able to run, and if need be, he would get the thing going, and it would be fine.
And his bicycles didn't work either.
Yeah. In his house, there's a brand new bike, but he just didn't get to the point of putting it together. So I just recall that working, and Jamie was a stickler about showing up to work. He never, ever missed school. He never missed work. He was never late. He was really, really serious and focused on that. But that was tested a lot, because a favorite thing to do in the summer in the evening was to drive up on the South Salem hills there, get into a big open spot, and then look out over the twinkling lights of the city. And often the car didn't start. So there were occasions where it took maybe all night to get home, but still he never missed work. Now I want to digress a little bit. The exception to the car thing was his black Cadillac limousine, circa 1960, Justin.
That sounds right.
Yeah, beautiful car. He got it from a retired pastor in Salem who used it for the sole purpose of ferrying parishioners or congregants back and forth to funerals. That was the only thing it was used for. It was the most beautiful car you ever seen. It was mint, as if it came out of a time warp, and it was flawless. You couldn't even hear the engine run. It just purred so much. So I think Jamie was offended on some level by the fact that there was nothing to work on in his car. So he used it as sort of a test vehicle. And he would try things out, like what would happen if you just put the transmission into the reverse and the car was still going forward. So as you can guess, and that would give him an opportunity to, go to work a little bit. As you can guess, the car didn't last long. And it was pretty much disappeared. and that was okay. He didn't see himself, you know, driving a black Cadillac limousine around the rest of his life. So he just had this special relationship to cars. Now back to work. I just have one more story to share, and I think this really reflects the kind of person Jamie was. He was a really strong advocate, and he was very outspoken, as you know, sometimes to his detriment, but he really felt strongly about things, and any kind of perceived injustice, you know, he needed to speak out about it. So at the time, everyone knows, anybody who's done any farming, during growing season, you work 7 days a week. So Wendell Creeder Sr., who was our big boss, felt like, if a farmer had to work 7 days a week, so did his crew. And Justin, you can, if I'm embellishing, you can correct me. And we didn't like that. We felt like we needed to have at least 1 day off a week so that we could nurse all of our skin ailments that we got from working in these humid conditions. We were always wet from the waist down, so you either had some kind of heat rash or foot fungus or any number of skin ailments that just were awful. Plus, we wanted to have some fun once in a while. So it was decided, you know, we're gonna stand up, we're gonna strike, we're gonna like do a work stoppage. We're going to get up there and we're going to tell old Wendell Sr. that we're not going to do it anymore. Of course, that was never going to happen. Ever, never. So what do you know that a few nights after, and we would talk about this off and on, but a few nights later, I got a call from Wendell Creeder Sr., who was the big boss. You didn't even dare speak to him, you know, let alone call him on the telephone. But that was a big deal to get a call from the big boss, because he had layers of children that were we had to go through to get to him. Well, Jamie had actually called him up and demanded that we get a day off. Do you remember that? And shockingly, and so of course, like a good union buster, Wendell said, "Now, what do you think about that, Mark?" As far as I'm concerned, Jamie can go. And I don't really know what I said, but there was lots of stammering. And I'm sure I just totally capitulated, just melted on site. But what do you know? But like a week later, we were given Sundays off for the rest of the summer, and that was thanks to Jamie. It wouldn't have happened otherwise. The irony, of course, is that we actually negotiated ourselves out of getting more money. Because, you know, you work, you get paid. But it was still a small victory for labor. So I'm gonna wind up, but I feel like I've been searching for a metaphor in all of this, but you know, I remember thinking when we did this sort of thing, and this is true of everybody, it just seemed horrible. Like the work just seemed horrible. But then in retrospect, it was one of the most joyous experiences I had in my life. And you know, I have to put that into context. Thinking about Jamie, who we wish could have lived longer, who had to stare down a lot of demons in his life, but he just kept going and he kept going and he kept doing it with humor, and he went as far as he could until he couldn't anymore. And so I just, you know, it's just important for all of us to remember that he had, and believe me, he had pain, but he caused some pain himself, you know, and we forgive him for that. But Jamie, I know, was found joy in his life. He found love in his life. He found companionship. He found friendship. All of those things. He found rewards in his job. So I know that he wouldn't have traded his life for any other. And I know that he was a happy person.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you, Mark.
I probably went on, but please, I'd love for people to share. Jill, did you want to say something?
I wasn't going to, but I do want to. When, shortly after we first got together, after our, what was the 20th high school reunion, we decided to do backpacking. First he took me to Fort Rock, which was one of his favorite places. And then he found out about Ray Jardine, who is into very lightweight backpacking. So he sewed these incredible blankets that were just weighed a few number of ounces, but they kept you warm, very warm. And we went through that book and we got everything pared down. So our first trip, we each only had to carry 50 pounds on our back each.
Only?
50. Yeah. Well, but we had some beautiful hikes, Strawberry Mountain and the Jefferson Lakes, Mount Jefferson Lakes region, and the Abert Rim. He loved the Abert Rim. He loved anything that was the highest or the lowest or the whatever, and we hiked out onto the edge of Abert Rim. Not with a lot of water, and this is probably in August. We thought, okay, the Jeep's down there, we'll just look at the Jeep. Well, the Jeep kind of disappeared, and it took us quite a while to get back, and we were very worried, and at one point he had me stop and just wait, and he ran, I don't know where he got that energy, and then saw the Jeep and came back and says, we're gonna live, we're gonna live there, and boy, it was one of our first trips, and we had heavy boots on, and I remember him taping up his boots because they had fallen apart, and with him, we traveled a lot, and I got to visit him when he would work, and he was always up for high density fun, and that's how he camped. There was never a moment that we just sat down and read a book or rested our feet in the stream for very long, but he just opened up a huge piece of my life that I would have never tried before, and we had so much fun. And the first night, he hadn't camped very much either, and he was a little bit leery of axe murderers out in the wilderness. So, I had camped a little bit before that, but he had these little battery operated beepers that go dee-dee-dee-dee, but anything goes past. And it goes strong
Oh, no.
all night. Echo, squirrels, chipmunks, whatever. Finally, I got him to take it down. I hope there weren't too many campers out there at the time, but we had a full life together, and I'll miss him very much. So, thank you.
Anyone else care to tell a story?
Dave Titus, and I want to know if it was Mark or Justin that encouraged Jamie to put mint oil under his armpits the day that it was you.
I don't know, but I used to do that myself.
But he talked about how he kind of started to sweat a little bit, and he worried about the friends. He didn't want to annoy him by smelling too much, so he put his in a 55-gallon drum of mint oil. And those of you, that's pretty strong stuff, so probably burned the hair off of it under his arms,
Well, yeah, and you were supposed to just take the leaves and do this and then, freshen up a little.
That's the way you did it, Mark?
Yeah. I guess he misunderstood.
One other question. Who rode in the limo? Raise your hand. Hey, there's a few people. Yeah, exactly. Well, I actually thought that Ray Lindley was going to bring a limo, and we were all going to like appear here and get out of the limo for stage effect, you know. But
He always insisted it wasn't a hearse. It was
yeah,
a
it wasn't
limo.
hearse. It
Because
was a
people say,
limo.
didn't you drive a hearse? No, I drove a limo.
There's in the booklet, there's a picture of it, and it's clearly a limo.
Mm-hmm.
There's no, there's no hatchback and.
Well, yeah, who rode in the limo when the pony keg hose came up through the back seat into the interior compartment so that you could have a beer while you were in the limo?
Not me.
Not you.
Jamie was so gracious
No, but yeah.
talking about the limo that
Oh,
for
there's Danny.
several years after he graduated, he would still drive the homecoming court down to the stadium in that limo.
Oh, that's great. So it sounds like it lasted longer than I thought it did.
Well, I mean, I'm not that much younger than you. But, it's funny, I didn't know Jamie that well because he was enough older than me. We weren't really in school together at the same time
Danny Jaffer.
until I was at Oregon State University. And we wound up in a Russian class together. And I knew who he was, and he knew who I was, but he knew my sister better than he knew me. And so that's how we really got to know each other, was in this Russian class. And I can guarantee he's a way better linguist than me. And he actually learned the language. And it was neat that he kept with it. But, you mentioned taking in strays. I felt that way when I was running for office, and Jamie came to me and said, "Hey, what can I do to help you?" And, and I said, "Well, yeah, that's great, whatever you can do." And he says, we're gonna have a picnic at our house, we're gonna have a fundraiser, and it turned out to be one of the best, not only a good fundraiser, but just a great party, the way that he and Jill could put them together, that was really a wonderful thing, and an otherwise not so wonderful camp.
I remember that, and that was a great time. Yeah.
I have one other thing. Bob Shingler sent me a text, and he wanted to have it read if I had a chance. So I'm going to read this. It's addressed to Jamie. Jamie, I'm going to miss you, my friend. I've enjoyed our talks about the whimsical on technological things and sometimes just about nothing at all. You know this better than most, that the shape of our lives is determined by the stuff within it and is very much bigger than the piece we can see. I want to let you know that my life is better for having known you, and if my prediction is true, that we will see each other on the other side. Love you, buddy, Bob Shingler.
Nice, Bob.
I want to say something. Living across from Jamie, if you ever had a project going on, like we had to move something out of the basement or we got a dumpster, he was a force to reckon with. Like, he gets so excited. Because he just loved being really physical and he'd get really amped about it. And it was always so fun to have him around that way. He was so beautiful. It was like, wow, Jamie's gonna move something that probably 50 people should move. And he would figure it out in his head. He'd get all the apparatuses. That part of Jamie was just incredible, honestly. He was such an engineer that if he got an opportunity to think about something that way, he got joy out of it. Completely. Yeah, he was amazing.
My goodness, he'd come up with the most bizarre engineering solutions to these problems, and they'd always work.
It would just be like, wow.
And on that same note, we were talking about my garden at some point in time, and I lived kind of kitty corner from him. And as I was talking about beans and how some year I was going to get a really nice bean trellis. He went out and built me a bean trellis. And this is the engineering part. Not only did he make it a bean trellis that you could, hang on a fence, he made it so it would be self-standing. He put special aluminum brackets on it so you could move it anywhere.
Oh.
I'll continue the theme. So, I can get up. I'm the next door neighbor. Jamie lived in my house for some length of time, and so I'm the beneficiary of all the crazy stuff. And when I moved in, it was a little contentious, the selling buying, because I said, I want the chimney fixed. And he said, well, you don't have to have a fire in the fireplace. And then there was a meat locker in the bottom, and I didn't want that in there because my grandson would get stuck in it. And so he said, well, we're not paying anybody to take that out. I don't know how he got it out, but he did. And then when I moved in, I thought, oh, and then I didn't know he was going to be my neighbor. And then when I moved in, it was like, oh, wow, Jamie, you know. And he came over with a list of 30 things that he meant to get to before he sold the house that he hadn't gotten to yet. And here's the linoleum, and I'll still do it if you want me to. So he was a great neighbor. He mowed my yard for chocolate chip cookies for many years. I've known him for the last 4. And the last gift he gave me, about 2 months ago, I came out in the yard. He had the dogs playing in the yard, and he says, "You notice anything different? You notice anything?" And I walked around, looked around, and here was this little 2.5-foot gnome in my garden area with the troll outfit with the pointy hat. And he said, "It was in my yard, and I just thought it belonged over here." And I said, "Well, he looks pretty good here. I think he can stay." And he looks a little like you. And he said, "Well, I'll take that as a compliment, you know. We're Nordic, you know." So, anyway, just a great neighbor to have, and I do truly miss him. I look out my window, the kitchen window, and it's like, you know, I water the tomatoes, and I'm waiting to hear him call Crazy Cat for breakfast. But I'm learning to get along without him, and he's still around in some ways. So.
Oh, yes.
Since we're doing neighbors, I'm directly across the street from Jamie's house. So I saw him all the time, every day for the past few years. He liked my coffee. I brought coffee. He thought it was the best coffee he ever had. And as far as the fixing thing goes, I was trying to get an old model train thing going. And I knew he was an electrical engineer. I did not know he was such a massive collector. And I said, "Do you know how to get?" He said, "Oh, please, let me work on that. It's an honor." So he got it going, and I didn't find out till later that he had a massive collection. By the way, whoever's in charge of all of that, if there's a plan for it, fine. If there isn't, I'll help. I've asked around about model train groups and stuff, but I know somebody else is in charge of that. Other than that, this is the coffee that came in.
Right in the pump. I wanted to say one thing too regarding Jamie's neighbors. What a wonderful and supportive group.
Yes.
Who were just so lovely in looking after him in Jamie's last days or in his decline. But it was such a lovely group, and I feel really lucky to have been in touch with all of you folks, and he was a lucky person to be where he was.
Yeah. Good people.
So I'd just like to share a memory. My name's Milana, and you guys all knew me as Chris Larson back in high school. Recently changed my name. But I knew Jamie in high school. He was my first boyfriend, and I had the pleasure of getting driven to the prom in the Cadillac. It was so cute. His friend, I think it was Pete Whelan, got dressed up in a little chauffeur outfit, and he was like wearing a little cap, and he drove us all around town that night. We were quite the couple. And as you guys were all talking, I just have memories of, that mint smell. It was everywhere. That was summer. That's a summer memory in my mind, mint. But, and like you, I got gnomed when I moved back here about 15 years ago. I opened the door one day and there's a giant gnome sitting there, and it had a letter tied around its neck from Jamie, and it was like how he escaped from the George Bush Ranch. He was gonna camp out in my yard. Oh, you know what? That guy's crazy, and he's so funny, and he always made me laugh. And thanks to everyone for sharing these memories, because it's just really bringing up a lot of memories for me too.
Anyone else with anything to share?
I just want to say, Mark, thank you for taking him food the last bit. That's kind of what I heard from Ray. You guys were taking him food?
Well, not exact. Well,
The neighbors were, for sure.
What's that?
The neighbors were, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, folks
I
were
know.
looking after him, and we were
Well, thank you.
trying to get him help anyway.
Yeah.
I heard a story one time about a skeleton. Does anybody know what he did with the skeleton?
It was in the limo. Rode around with it in the
was
limo,
a
I
real
think.
skeleton?
No. No, thankfully. There would be some laws that serious laws that have been broken.
I would be surprised.
I remember we had a party at well, he's now my ex-husband, but we had a party at his apartment, and we woke up the next morning and all the doorknobs were taken off of every door in the place, even the front door. And there's Jamie. I go into the spare bedroom, and Jamie's laying face down on the floor with a broken glass in his hand and all the doorknobs around him. And I don't think he did it. I think they set him up. But it was, I'm like kicking his shoe going, Jamie, party's over, go home.
Well, there are plenty of wonderful stories circulating privately, and please, everyone, linger if you care to. And there's all kinds of wonderful snacks and some.
And write a
drinks.
note in the book.
And please do write a note.
Write a note to Jamie.
Yeah, this is just how we envisioned it. A very joyous celebration, and thanks everyone for coming. Dr. Jane.
And thank you for everything that you've done.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. And Justin for writing that beautiful thing that Justin wrote. That was beautiful.
Justin, thank you for writing the beautiful obit.
Yeah.
It's in the book that you.
Oh, good. It's in here.
All right, thanks, folks.